If you are just joining us, Anish Rahman reporting Al Arabiya and Al Hurra television, two Arabic language stations. Both are now reporting that Saddam Hussein has been executed. They say that execution took place within the last 10 minutes or so. CNN has not been able to independently confirm that. We are working on doing that, as just about every other network in the world is trying to do at this time. For the last several hours, it has been very difficult exactly pinning down correct information. We're being very careful in what we can tell you that we've been able to confirm. We do not want to go too far out. We do not want to enter the realm of speculation. But Al Hurra and Al Arabiya, two Arabic language stations, are reporting that Saddam Hussein has been executed. Anish standing by for us in Baghdad. So is Arwa Damon. Anish, what happens to Saddam Hussein's body after he is executed, if in fact he's already been executed? I ask this not just for curiosity, but obviously there's great political importance and significance some would place to the remains of Saddam Hussein. Would they bury him in a public grave?
Yeah, as far as my understanding of Muslim tradition, Hussein, the deceased, would have to be buried within 24 hours. A reported interview with one of Saddam Hussein's daughters said she wants the body buried in Yemen, and then when the situation in Iraq comes under control, brought back here, as you just suggested, down the line. That would create undoubtedly controversy on the streets of Baghdad. The relatives of Saddam Hussein, there was some back and forth as to whether any of them would be there, his wife, perhaps his eldest daughter. The hitch was both of them are on Iraq's most wanted list for embezzlement and funding terrorism. Unlikely they were present. What we understand perhaps is that the only person present on behalf of Saddam Hussein was the sole lawyer that exists here in Baghdad. The rest of his lawyers outside of Iraq. If no one claims the body, though, the Iraqi government will simply do with it as they please in terms of burying it. We saw with Abu Musab al-Zarqawi a secret burial to try and prevent any sort of martyrdom from emerging from this gravesite, Anderson.
Arwa Damon, have there been, I'm sure there have been extra security precautions. What kind of precautions have you been seeing?
Well, actually, Anderson, interestingly, we are still in the period of that would have just ended the regular curfew that is put in place in the capital that ends actually at 6 a.m. As of now, we have not heard about any extra precautions that the Iraqi government is taking. Presumably, once the official announcement of the execution does take place, there will be some sort of curfew that is put into effect. That is what we have seen in the past. But right now, the streets of Baghdad, perhaps eerily quiet to a certain degree. Again, many Iraqis still indoors, awake all night, glued to their television sets, awaiting any kind of word as to when this execution will have taken place.
And again, just repeating, Al Arabiya and Al Hurra, two Arabic language stations, have now reported and are continuing to report that Saddam Hussein has been executed. They say that execution took place in the minutes before 10 o'clock Eastern Time in the United States, just before 6 a.m. Baghdad time. Again, CNN has not been able to independently verify that. We are working on that, and we are continuing to monitor all the other networks and all the other Arabic language stations in the region. I'm also joined now by, in addition to Michael Sharf, I'm also joined by John Alterman with the Center for Strategic and International Studies in D.C., and by Vali Nasser, author of the remarkable book, The Shia Revival, also with the Council on Foreign Relations. He joins me from Salt Lake City. Vali Nasser, if this is in fact true, if Saddam Hussein has been executed, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's an end of an era. It's an unfinished business from the U.S. invasion and occupation of Iraq. But it will have very little bearing on what is happening in Iraq today. We put a lot of emphasis on Saddam all along, in curing all the problems in the Middle East, problems in Iraq once he was removed, once he was captured. But none of that has happened. And in fact, now his trial and his execution, if anything, is likely to divide Iraqis. Iraqis are deeply divided on what his rule meant, what justice means, and what his execution means.
John Alterman, you agree with that?
I do. It wouldn't surprise me, by the way, that this is being reported by Al Hurra, a U.S.-operated Arabic language station, and Al Arabiya, the pan-Arab station that's closest to the U.S. government. It seems to me that they're probably dribbling out the news to the guys who have been working most closely with them. But the real issue, as Vali suggests, is not so much Saddam. He's the history. The real issue is what lays ahead, and the fact that so many Iraqis really fear for their lives when they leave their homes.
Does Saddam matter anymore, John?
I don't think he really does. I think this is all part of an Iraqi past that is past, and what really matters going forward is how do you begin to put Iraq back together, and Saddam did it through brutality and blood, and it's not clear how somebody else might do it a different way right now.
Valley, of course, in your book, which is a remarkable work, and if someone has not read it, they really should in sort of getting an understanding of this region and also what is happening in Iraq specifically, though the book talks more than just that. Obviously, Sunnis and Shia see this event very differently. Does this deepen the divide?
Yes, it does. In particular, because Saddam is not being executed for the most heinous crimes that he committed, particularly against the Kurds, but for killing of 150 Shias in a Shia village after an uprising against him. It comes across as if the Shiites got to carry out vengeance against an act by him, and it's likely to make it much more of a sectarian verdict and a sectarian execution. I think it would have been much better for Iraq if Saddam had been executed on charges of having killed over 200,000 Kurds in the Anfal campaign.
Anish Rahman, we're continuing to monitor the situation in Baghdad. Anish, there were other trials. There was a genocide trial that Saddam would have had to face justice in. Will that continue? Can he be tried in absentia?
As far as we're told, essentially the charges are dropped now that Saddam Hussein, according to these two Arab language networks, has been executed. As you mentioned, the trial of Anfal, where he faced for the first time genocide, was to resume and is to resume on January 8th. Obviously, Saddam Hussein will not be there. There will undoubtedly, especially among the Kurds who suffered greatly in that Anfal campaign, perhaps be a sense of remorse that Saddam didn't sit in the docks to see that trial through. The assumption that had existed for some time during this year was that really the execution of Saddam Hussein would not come until the end of that trial. Relatively speaking, this first trial where Saddam faced crimes against humanity after a failed assassination attempt was relatively smaller in terms of numbers that were executed, 148 young men and boys versus what you saw in Anfal, easily over 100,000. So there was thought, an assumption essentially, that the execution of Saddam Hussein would wait until the end of Anfal. But keep in mind that when we entered the execution phase, this was essentially a political phase. And I can recall a number of moments from Iraqi politicians who bear the same anger, the same emotions against Saddam Hussein as many of the people, coming up to us and expressing that whenever Saddam Hussein essentially hijacked the court. The minute they were handed this docket, the minute it became political, everyone essentially figured that it was just a matter of time for Saddam.
We're also joined by Michael Scharf, law professor at Case Western Reserve University, helped train Iraqi judges who tried Saddam Hussein. Professor Scharf, was the trial fair?
Well, Anderson, before the judgment was published and the English translation was available for people to read, there was a lot of criticism about things that occurred during the trial. And clearly, this will go down in history as one of the messiest trials of all time. And it was televised gavel to gavel, so people saw the trial unfold, warts and all. But I have had a chance now to read the 298-page, single-space, small font judgment of this tribunal. And it's really an extraordinary document. And what you get from reading the judgment is the fact that the judges really dealt with all of the legal challenges in a lot of detail. And their legal analysis is above board. I couldn't find any major problems with it. And the findings of fact in this judgment are very, very intricate. The minutiae, the details are going to create a record that shows that Saddam Hussein and the other defendants actually convicted themselves on the strength of their own documents, much like the Nazis did at Nuremberg 60 years ago.
Again, we're getting viewers who are just joining us. I just want to bring you up to date on what we know and what we do not know, what we cannot confirm at this point. Al-Hurra, which is an Arabic language U.S.-backed television network, as well as Al-Arabiya, another Arabic language network, a pan-Arab network, both are reporting that Saddam Hussein was executed, that Saddam Hussein is dead. They say the execution took place shortly before 10 o'clock Eastern Time in the United States. That's shortly before 6 a.m. in Baghdad. CNN has not been able to independently verify that. We are monitoring the situation very closely, and we are trying to verify this on our own, as well as checking out any other networks who may be able to verify this. We'll bring that all to you as we know it. Anish Rahman is standing by, as well as Arwa Damon, both in Baghdad. Anish,